And we are live.
Welcome everyone, welcome back. We have our second talk of the day, and this is also an invited talk by Pratap Vardhan, who is a principal data scientist at Grameener. And many of you may have already heard of Grameener. They do some fantastic work and make some really beautiful pictures as well. Pratap is part of the team, so we can expect to see some really fantastic plots for sure. Thank you, Pratap, for being with us. Pratap is based out of Princeton, and we are excited to have him as our next speaker. And I guess it will tie in well with our keynote talk as well. Thanks, Pratap. Looking forward to hearing your talk.
Thanks, Professor Prabhu, and thanks everyone for having me here. So I'll dive into the talk, but more or less, let me give you a disclaimer that I didn't time the talk pretty well. So in case if it stretches a bit, we'll cut short, or if we have time, we'll take lots of questions and try to do anything else that we can do beyond the talk. The notebook for this talk is already available on my GitHub repo. You can probably, if you want to skip ahead or go forward, you can do that. I will try and run this talk through the notebook. If we need to play around a little bit during the talk, we can do that as well. If you have questions, do ask. I might switch my tabs to check if there are any questions and then answer them as we go. So my primary motivation to this talk was actually what happened last month. So there was a challenge, which was largely around how do we create a map every day and specific to some theme. So it was around like on a particular day, you would create something around points or lines. Some days it might be 3D maps and so on. So to make it interesting and probably even challenging, I thought let's focus on maybe use only Matplotlib and specific to India datasets. So over the course of 30 days, we managed to create some maps which did seem little educative. Some were mostly fancy, but I hope in this talk, I would give you a glimpse of how Matplotlib didn't necessarily only create scientific plots, but could be useful to make any production quality plots that you might like to publish or share stories with other people. So to begin with, most of the talk and for the most of the work that I have shared revolves around these libraries, primarily pandas and geopandas, which we use for reading datasets and manipulating datasets. And we work with Matplotlib primarily for plotting. I'll just give a brief overview of different jargons I might use in the talk, but primarily it will revolve around what's a figure, what's an axis, and there are different markers, different kinds of plots that you can do. This is a standard plot that you can look up on Matplotlib website as well. So to start off, different geospatial data sets will be available in different formats. One of the modern formats is GeoJSON format, and in which different attributes, specifically whether the shape under which is it a multi-polygon or is it a point or is it a line string, will be encoded in it. We just read the data set and it is recognized as a geodata frame class, and we try to see how the values are structured. So right now I've just read India states JSON file, and I could see there are a bunch of states and how the geometry looks like. Now, if you take a closer look at the geometry, and you'll actually see it's a strings of a bunch of lat long values, normally your GPS coordinates. Now, the good part with working with notebooks and with GeoPandas is if you're not sure how the data set looks like, you can readily call the plot method. And then that sort of gives you an automated way of looking at the map directly. And you don't have to worry about like, how do you set the color axis and so on. Do you have to do reprojection and all of that? GeoPandas understands what current projection of the file is, and it projects the image in that format. But what would be interesting for us to understand is how do these data sets actually look like for us to make any manipulation visually to either join multiple data sets or to make changes by visual encoding. So let's focus on one particular row here. I'm filtering the data set to Andhra Pradesh to look at how the geometry looks like. And if I specifically pull out this row to an individual object or an individual row, you notice that this is a Shapely object. So underneath, GeoPandas uses a Shapely library, which again creates shapes for you. If you just print the shape out, it again gets generated as the repr function is usually an image, which you can view in the notebook. Also, if you're planning to work with, let's say, only a smaller subset of the data or mostly outlines, one of the easiest things that you can do is probably merge all these states. Now, you can treat each of these rows as individual sets. So one of the operations you can do is use unary union, which merges all the data, all the rows together to create a singular point. In which case here, it's a singular shape of India outline, right? Now, let's dive in. Right now, we have just read the India states, which is not pretty useful for us to do anything. To make things interesting, let's look at the railway stations data set that we have, right? So all these data sets, you can go through the notebook later on. For most of the data sets are available online, but otherwise I'll share in the notebook repo in some time. So you'd notice if I read this file into a data frame called GDF stations, you'll notice that it has a bunch of rows. The only rows for now we'll be interested would be the geometric column, which gets created based on what configuration it's present. Each of the station is encoded as a point. Just give me a second. I'm just disabling my video so that you can see the screen much clearly. Okay. Now you notice that there are in total 8,990 stations, but of which we don't have lat longs for all of the points. There are around 8,697 of them. Now, the easiest way that you can simply do is directly call GDF stations.plot, and you'll start looking at something that looks like an India outline. In some ways, it no longer looks like actually railway stations. It almost looks like railway tracks. But it turns out that there are actually a lot of train stations which are not so used for domestic purposes, but it could be for cargo and other purposes. But since the map is zoomed at this level, we may not what we are actually seeing are just points, right? But they are scaled to a point that it sort of makes us feel that these are lines. Now, we haven't done anything fancy here. We've just called plot subplots, which gives us access to an axis object, and to GDF stations, we just pass that AX equal to AX so that the axis can get reused. We're only mentioning color equal to blue and then the marker size as 5. We are just ignoring the line width for time being. Now, the other thing that we could do is we have read the GDF states earlier. Now, probably we can now combine two different data sets only for plotting purposes. So now what we have done is we've just taken GeoSeries on the outline object and added to the same axis. You might have noticed that I'm mentioning color equal to none because since I'm plotting the state outline after I've plotted the stations, it might appear that if I don't mention the color might get completely filled. And if you want to add some text, you can use ax.annotate. You might have noticed that I'm using some xy equal to 85 and 37. These are nothing but lat long positions. So what happens in matplotlib figure is right now, since I've directly used the initial plot that I've passed to my subplot is GDF stations. And it underneath uses a coordinate system, which is working with lat longs. So by default, if you don't mention any of the axis transforms that the annotate function can use, it will by default assume that you're using the same scaling functions as in what the map has been drawn on. Now, going further, this looks fine for us to do an exploratory analysis, but this is not something that we would like to share with people, or we can make it much pretty. The problem most of the people assume is that Matplotlib makes charts only for notebook users. It might not be production ready, or for us to do any fancy charts, we need to start working with some of those fancy tools. So I'll probably cover some of the examples of by making minimal changes to themes, you will be able to pretty much get production quality plots. But before going there, let's add another data set. What we'll do here is we'll join the number of departures that are happening at a station level. So we'll just try to modify the size of the station by the number of trains that are passing by. So to do this, we'll just first determine how many unique stations are there in the schedules data set. Then try and combine number of unique trains passing by that by doing a mapping of it. After that, we'll use a PD card function. What this lets us do is, once we know how many unique trains are there, we'll just not, instead of doing a linear mapping of what the shape of the circles should be, I'm just binning them into certain buckets. So we'll say that in Omalur, there are 10 trains that usually pass every day. So I'm giving it a size of 0.5 and so on. So now you notice this plot is somewhat little better than what we have seen earlier, but the number of lines of code that we have written here doesn't change much. The number of lines are pretty much same. The only thing that has changed is we have added a couple of variables like bg color and then fill value, which we are reusing to just fill the properties for individual plots. A couple of things that we do to make these plots look pretty is to give it a shine effect. Now, whenever there are a lot of data points on your plots, and if you want to make any variations, one of the things that you could do is use an alpha property. In which sense, if you have any hex codes, the later two values is something that you can give to mention opacity. Now, you would notice that if you zoom into any of these plots, at certain points, there is a high overlap. Now, if there are bigger bubbles and if they're overlapping together, a certain shine opacity comes up. This is something that you pretty much see with those nightlight satellite images. So this is the same property that you can apply to any of your mapping plots where you have a lot of data points, but you want to probably emphasize on density. The only additional thing that we have done here is we've removed the set axis off. In the absence of that, we don't see the lat and long, but this is pretty much that we can save this plot or try to do any other things that we would like. But this is only a static plot. What other things do you think we can probably play around to make it like an animated video? One thing that came to my mind was it might be interesting to see how actual train stations might be doing within the day. How are trains probably concentrated at which of the stations or which parts of the day are more heavily queued up at certain places of the country? So to do that, so what we did was we took only Rajdhani trains and then tried to see at every 5 minute interval where are the lat long coordinates of these 24 trains. Now, so you notice one of the interesting things that happens is right from Kolkata and then through the UP. Now these trains are coming in the reverse way from Delhi. A lot of traffic actually gets picked up in some of these places. It's not like all these trains are uniformly spread out. This is something that might make sense, or it might be visibly easy for us to understand rather than doing any other tabular formats or any other visual representations. Now, in the later part of the talk, we'll probably get into details of how you can probably do animations without, again, writing a lot of lines of code, but still reusing singular plots. Now, other data sets that I wanted to probably share with you, and then also hope that you guys will also explore further, is something called as OpenStreetMap. And there's a wonderful community of people who are building data sets, like people make Wikipedia edits by adding new information. People in this community are actually creating data sets like what you see in Google Maps. Where is a hospital located? Where are temples located? Or what type of facilities does a place have? So if you look at one of the land use data sets there, which primarily contains whether it has a certain city as a park or a commercial facility, or does it have a farm, does it have a recreation ground, and so on. Now, what I was interested to look into this was, can we quantify in each of our urban cities, what is the percentage of land is green? Like how much percentage of area does each city allocated for, let's say, gardens or forest areas or national parks and so on. So this data set seemed useful to quantify that. There may be gaps in terms of how the coverage might have happened, with the OSM mapping, but I thought it reasonably covered while validating with other published papers. So what we do is we take a subset of green spaces that we consider would be useful, and we only focus on these 96,000 rows. One of the things that you need to keep in mind while dealing with geospatial data sets, especially if they have any position encoded, is what projection system are they coming with. Some data sets, mostly they do come with 4326 EPSA encoding, which is a standard format, like how you look when you try to look at things from like a globe perspective, right? Which is coded as lat longs. But not always that might be useful. Sometimes you might have to change the encoding to, for your use case, to 3857, which is something similar to how our rectangular maps look like. However, one of the flaws with rectangular maps is the portions of the map which are closer to, let's say, northern hemisphere, they tend to be exaggerated than compared to, let's say, Africa or India. So what we will focus in this use case is try to filter our data sets to only primarily 6 cities, and then try to filter the data frame to only those cities, extract the entities that were present in the earlier data set for only these 6 cities, and then try to store them in a dictionary so that we can reuse them later. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 20 kilometer square grid and filter the data set for each of these entities, each of these 6 entities, and then try to identify the bounds as well. Some of these operations could be time consuming because you're trying to reproject a data set from one projection system to another system. Most of the times you don't have to do these things all the time, or you could just do them once, write back to a file, and then reuse that if you're just going to work on that projection system. So for us to calculate the green areas, what we are supposed to do is we take the area of the total bounding box and then try to filter the areas that are present for only those areas, and then just divide those two areas. Now, either you can do, one of the ways that you can do is you do a manual sum of individual rows, but like we have learned earlier, if you were to take an intersection union of all the subset at one go and then do a summation of it later on, those operations could be much faster than compared to doing them row by row. So this leaves us that probably Delhi has one of the highest green space areas, up to 12% of Delhi from its center, 20 cross 20 kilometer area, has a higher green coverage, whereas Chennai probably has one of the lowest areas. How would it look like if we try to overlay an underlying map, which we are more used to, and then on top of that, we can put this OpenStreetMap shapes and then see where is it concentrated, which parts of the city does it have. So to do that, we could use a library called Contextly. What this does is, depending upon the plot that you provide, it will automatically fetch the base map. You can provide the OpenStreetMap's tile map that it needs to use. It will automatically pick up what zoom level it has to do, or you can explicitly give the zoom level that it can use. So after we plot the shapes that are needed for New Delhi, and then mention the limits, you can pass the contextuality object with the actual axis. This will automatically pick up the underlying base image. So we'll see here the green areas are something that we have mentioned here in this plot. And the underlying map, it assumes that since the matplotlib plot already exists, this is the image that has to be inserted before the shapefiles are present. Now, if you want to extend this for all other 6 cities, we can go ahead and do subplots and then loop through each of the axis objects and then add these things. So the code remains pretty much more or less the same thing. We just add a loop object here and then try to iterate through different font sizes, whatever works out fine. So you notice that what we are looking at right now is something that has been entirely done in Matplotlib with help from GeoPandas, and this didn't require any designer to intervene to make changes. So I'm hoping some of these examples will probably give you confidence that Matplotlib is not just for scientific plotting, but will probably also help you to create plots that might be more expressive. And that is something that even a layman can actually start reading and using them.
You have 10 more minutes.
Sure. So this apart of, we have also dealt with satellite images which track land cover usage, like how urban sprawl is spreading, which is essentially where are the urban areas present in 1985, 1995, and 2005. And in another example, we also looked at how the air quality index is either on a certain day improving or how bad is it. Now, to visually quantify, maybe we can randomly populate certain random points in an area and then overlay that on a map to give an effect that, okay, this is how smoked up a place could be. Now, so far we have discussed more or less static plots. What if we could make some of these things that can run as animations? So we can use some of the utilities provided within Matplotlib called as the animation function. To get to there, I'll briefly touch upon what dataset I'm working with. I'll not dive into the specifics. Here I'm working with the migration dataset from the census. It essentially talks about from each state and each district, where did people migrate to, which other states. So we just take a couple of states that we are interested in, a couple of large 8 states, filter the data set for that, and then try to do a pivot for each of the district here. And against each state, how are people migrating? Now, once we get that data set, we can just do some checks. You'll notice one of the things that I got educated was I used to assume that mostly people migrate to city places. I didn't know how big of a migration hub Surat and Ahmedabad were. This was also pretty evident when I started plotting it out into a map form. So what we could do with the animation plot is essentially first create a static plot. You can skip the specifics of how to create this. But let's assume you got an static plot which looks like this. We need to store each of these objects, which could be the state object which you want to change. Let's say from Uttar Pradesh, you want to go to next in the animation, you want to highlight Rajasthan. In that case, you want to store all the state objects into a certain object, which you can later manipulate or update in an animation function call. Other way of doing it is that you run this through in a loop, you save them as PNG images, and then you re-render that as an MP4 file, which works out fine, but it is pretty inefficient because Matplotlib gives you access to the underlying plot object where you can individually access these properties or these objects and then just update the specific ones. So we just create an animate function. What this lets us do is we take all the scatter points and then reset the sizes based on the new state that we provide. So the animate function accepts a state from which we update the size of these bubbles, the color of the state. So we want to gray out the active state, or we want to set the colors of other things that we can change here. Once we get access to that, you have multiple ways to access a video file. Either you can save the file, MP4 file, but within the notebook, if you're interacting, you can use JS-HTML and then play around and then see how the values change, or if you are getting something that's acceptable to you, or you want to change something else. Now, one other thing that we did, which I personally liked, for the effort that we spent, was to understand how or which places in the country have ever elected women MPs. There are still places, considering from 1960 onwards, where women MPs haven't been elected, and you can actually see these dark spots. There are at least now like 200 and 65 places across the country which haven't elected a woman MP yet. Now, these are the things which might make sense if you can communicate these visuals, these plots, like you work with your notebooks in a more effective way, which people can understand. Not just the plots that your peer data scientist or data analyst can understand. And I think Matplotlib is not necessarily a rigid platform. It does have a little bit of learning curve for you to pick it up and then go with it. But once you get to understand the nitty gritties, it doesn't take dozens or hours of effort for you to come up with these things. Most of the plots that we have created as part of the 30-day map challenge were done in a couple of hours. To the matter of fact that about when we spent 3 hours creating an entire plot, about half the time we were spending in actually curating the data set, cleaning the data set, and then cleaning up if there are any issues with that. Then we probably 20% of the remaining time was actually done for actually visualizing and getting it to this format. And the remaining 10% of the time or 20% of the time was usually around tinkering with the annotations, which I think we haven't figured out a way where it could be done in an automated way where you can specify from which point you want to extract the text and then place it around. So there are a bunch of slides that I thought I'll cover, but I think it's not well suited for a 30-minute talk. What I'll do is I'll share the links which I think might be useful for you to go through at your leisure. But do let me know if you have any questions that you want me to answer. I'll take it as part of next few minutes. Otherwise, I'll be around on the chat as well, or we can take them there or offline. The notebook and the presentation and the data are available on these links. All the 30 charts that were done as part of the 30-day map challenge is available on that Twitter thread if you want to access.
Thank you so much for a beautiful talk. So far, there aren't any questions per se at this point. So I have a few quick questions since no one else has asked some questions. So we have a couple of minutes for questions. So again, I would imagine the very first time someone, the biggest time investment in something like this, perhaps would be the first plot that you ever make, right? Because you figure out, okay, how do you read the map, and you put this together and actually get a map. And then I think the subsequent modifications may be a couple of hours.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's true.
Okay.
In fact, I think the first two plots that I created, or even only the first plot, probably took me 6 hours or 4 hours, even though it's a simple one. Right. But once you get the template and the structure, like those are all pretty much defaults. You know what defaults to use, what to reuse, and then you, pretty much from there on, you just figure out. You're mostly focusing on the story to tell and not the plot actually.
Right. So the thing is, I find the same thing with my plots. Is it where the the Matplotlib gallery is really handy. So you go look at a plot, you pick it, and then you get the code. So maybe for these geospatial visualizations, perhaps if there was a gallery like that, that would actually make life easy for a lot of people. Is there one already? So
yeah. Could be. I think for anyone starting out, I would suggest do check out GeoPandas, which does give decent plotting. Apart from that, there's another library called GeoPy, which also does decent default plotting. But after, if your needs are mostly for exploring data sets, understanding how data is spread across, get some insights, and you want to move on, not everyone needs to do fancy plots or in a way that it needs to be polished enough, right? And there are enough geo visualization based libraries where you don't need to do a lot of tweaking. For a lot of these needs, there are specific use cases. There are actually libraries that you could do with. Like, for example, you could use something like Kepler-GL's Python alternative within the notebook. Like if you want 3D plots, if you want to use Mapbox itself within notebooks, you can do that as well. But for me, it was more of a nitpick that I keep hearing that Matplotlib is not easy to use. I always found it a little amusing, as well as I understand where that's coming from. I just thought, yeah, let's give it a shot and see how bad it is. And turns out it's actually not. It's just that we just need better examples, maybe.
Right. So there are some nice comments for you on the chat, and there's one question in particular, which is, where do you get the data sets? Lee Thomas is asking.
So usually you search, I mean, you search you search on Google, you be on certain forums like DataMeet, or
Okay.
you be active in the community like OSM, where people always keep sharing, right? And you bookmark them.
Okay.
That's one. The other thing could be just engage with community. You'll always come across people sharing interesting data sets they would want. Or in fact, very recently we've scraped Pradhan Mantri's what was that? Rural facilities data set. So that is probably India's largest lat-long data set, about 770,000 rural facilities available in India at this
Wow.
point in time.
Wow.
So funny thing is, obviously, government data sets will be there on some website where we have to scrape and pull, but there are always people doing it just because they want to look at data. But I think we are still in a better position compared to 5 or 10 years ago with the availability of data, especially in the GeoVis side or geospatial side.
Okay.
That is one. And the other thing, I didn't cover the satellite imagery part. You can check out the notebook, the other aspects of how to fetch. I mean, from a imagery point, I think I usually go to the NASA sources. You have Earth Explorer, where you just create an account and most of the data sets are pretty free to use. That is one. Other is probably Sentinel-2 from Copernicus. That apart, if you're interested in elevation datasets, you can always look out ISRO's Bhuvan dataset. You just have to register, which is a little painful maybe, but otherwise it's also free and you can download.
Nice, nice. And one final question is, where can you get the correct legitimate shape files for Indian maps? I think that's an important local question.
I suggest do check out. I think DataMeet maps are still fine. I don't think they are that bad. They also have the Survey of India recently released maps, I think maybe 2 years ago. So they have also pulled those together and they put it here. These are the shapefiles which should most likely work.
Okay, so DataMeet maps would be the place to go. Okay. Awesome. So thank you for a wonderful talk and all of your helpful responses as well. So thanks again for being with us, and we look forward to seeing or hearing you at the chat in the various forums that are available.
Sure.
Thanks again, Pratap.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, so Pratap, maybe he can be available in Hillside launch or any of the launch if he is free now, so that people can take up their questions there.
Yeah, but I don't know. We have like 2 minutes now before the next talk.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Okay. So is Jitin available?